welcome to the Popcorn Junkies. Promising young woman. Are you a promising young woman?
I probably was at some point.
A promising young woman.
I've probably lost all promise now.
Promising Young Woman is the new film, well, the first feature film from Emerald Fennell, who is a director, actress, producer. She wrote, produced and directed this film. It's her first film, wow, coming straight out the gates.
Wrote, produced and directed.
And it stars Carey Mulligan, who's been nominated for Best Actress. It's been nominated for Best Picture. I mean, wow, talk about coming out the gates, eh? I think she's a school friend of Phoebe Waller-Bridges, who made Killing Eve. And I believe she's a co-writer. She directed the second season. So she's got some pretty friends in some pretty high places. But that doesn't diminish from the fact that this is quite an accomplishment to get this film made. It was shot in 21 days. Yeah, as I say, it stars Carey Mulligan. It also stars, interestingly, Bo Burnham, who, if you don't know who Bo Burnham is a YouTuber, well, was a YouTuber, but a very successful YouTuber. But he also went on to direct 8th Grade, which was both one of mine and our family's favourite films.
8th Grade?
He wrote and directed 8th Grade, yeah, which is kind of curious. That, like he said, when we saw him talk, and he said, wow, yeah, 27, 28-year-old man writes a film about an 8th grade girl. Strange.
Mind you, I suppose if he'd been a YouTuber for a long time, he would have got into the minds of a lot of young people.
Absolutely. And we mustn't forget, of course, Emerald Fennell has also been nominated for Best Director. So, I mean, it's a huge number. And so, therefore, it's an incredibly important film on so many levels. It's described, in terms of its genre, as a comedy thriller. And I think, in order to get the comedy element of it, you have
I wouldn't describe it as a comedy thriller at all.
That
That would give you totally the wrong steer. It's a thriller, but some of the characters have great wit, but it's not a comedy.
No. I mean, I suppose if you, at a stretch, you're thinking of it as a comedy in the same way that Killing Eve was dark and a comedy. This is a very dark.
Yeah, but you wouldn't call Killing Eve a comedy thriller.
Really, no. It's sort of a twisted.
But we laughed.
Yeah, we laughed and we gasped. So essentially, it's a revenge thriller. And what's curious about this film is that Carey Mulligan, interestingly, her character, isn't the woman to whom something has happened.
And I love that premise. It's so smart.
Why did you love that? I mean, it's a revenge thriller against men, but she's doing it on behalf of her best friend.
Of her best friend. And because I think it shows how a crime like this impacts everybody, and it shows us that writ large, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does.
Oh my God, this film was at the beginning of it, I didn't know if I was going to be able to watch it.
Yeah.
All the way through, because you do spend a lot of time sort of pulling away and like squinting one eye at the horror of, well, the multiple situations that she's in, and actually a friend of mine, who we often share actually the same taste in films. I said to her that I was going to be watching it that night, and she said, "Oh no, I couldn't finish it because it was so one note on men, you know."
Right, anti-men,
and yeah, but it's showing us a kind of man. Well, multiple kinds of men, actually.
Oh, absolutely.
And
I mean, it leaves no man there's no man in this film that isn't, on some level, deeply suspect or damaged in their attitude to women or what they allow to happen to women. I mean, it was curious because we watched it as a family, and there was an element to this film. I mean, it starts very quickly with a scene in which, and what happens, the pattern across the film is that Carey Mulligan's character essentially feigns being drunk in many different scenarios to essentially sort of honey trap almost these men. And at a point where they're crossing a certain boundary of, permission or not, or compliance or not to have sex with her or be sexual with her, she snaps into sobriety and confronts them with their behaviour. And just that in itself, as a little kind of concept, is incredibly rich and challenging.
Oh my God, it was so empowering as a woman watching that each time. Yeah, and she's got this little book that she's marking down, and she has 5 little marks, and then she has a red mark, doesn't she? Yeah. And I think we're supposed to believe that in that red mark she actually murders. So for every 4, she murders 1.
Oh, did you?
Is that what you thought?
I don't know what I read into the red mark. I thought I read into the red mark that she let them go. No, because there would have been a trail of destruction behind her and there wasn't anyone chasing her. I didn't believe that.
Because we have that one scene where she's the first guy and she's walking down the street the next morning, isn't she? And she's got this drip down her leg of what looks like blood.
Right.
And you think she's blood splattered.
Yes.
But then the camera moves up and she's holding a hot dog with ketchup. And I think it is playing with us on what we think might have happened.
I just thought it was the ketchup.
Because why would we have 4 black lines and then 1 red? I think every so often she killed somebody. That's what my understanding of it was. And it would just depend. She would make her decision there and then, and whether she would let them go or not. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh God, is that interesting? You didn't think. So, what was the red mark?
I don't know. I didn't know whether the red mark was where she felt a moment of compassion for the bloke, or actually didn't feel that the bloke had crossed a certain line or something like that. I mean, I suppose
that's so interesting, isn't it?
Because
God, tell us below what you thought. If you thought she was killing somebody.
One of the things about it stylistically and in terms of it is where it is really challenging, and I think where people might find it a bit kind of uncomfortable or difficult to watch is it's incredibly self-conscious in the way that it's filmed, in the way that it's framed, in the way that it's shot. I mean, I don't know if you noticed, all of the shots beautifully symmetrical, incredibly considered, and sometimes that level of sort of pre-thought and thinking in set design, colour design, pastel colours, baby, bubblegum pink and all that kind of stuff. But these beautifully sort of, so the first shot of her sort of on the sort of banquette, if you like, in the nightclub where she's like sort of sitting there, incredibly symmetrical. And so you've got...
I didn't notice that. I knew I loved looking at it, but I didn't know why. That's your director's eye.
But sometimes that sort of a level of stylisation can really interfere with it. So
some people won't like that style, but I liked the almost caricatured sense to it. I liked that. It was sort of larger than life. I didn't know, I had to find my footing with it to begin with. And your mum said at one point, didn't she? She said, it's very odd.
Yeah.
It disorientated you a bit.
My mum found the rhythm was very odd. I don't know what she meant. It was sort of rhythmically...
You didn't quite know where you were going. But I quite liked that. As that went on, that was kind of the feeling that you had about everything. Because it was making you question everything. Because she does some very dark things. And what I found interesting as a woman was how I started to judge her. I was judging her, the victim of what had happened, in the way that society ends up saying, wow, was that a bit too much? I mean, was she a bit too cruel? I mean, at the end of the day, did the guy, was he really going to? And I found myself doing that.
Yeah, I mean, it is relentlessly challenging as a man to watch, and it's interesting to watch it as a man because, of course,
as a woman.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I mean, in terms of, it forces you as a male viewer to think about your every single interaction with women that you've ever had. It forces you to ask unsettling questions about, when you get drunk, when other people have got drunk, how you are, because so much kind of flirtation and meeting with people happens in a drunken state. And this film goes to the heart of that. I mean, this is a film that pivots around the vulnerability that comes with not being sober in many regards, both as a woman, but also where that takes you as a man, and where is this the real man? And I think it's a really interesting film about what's a real man? What kind of a man are you? Because there's a lot of men in this film that end up saying, I'm a nice man.
But I'm a nice man. No, but I'm the nice one.
Yeah, I know.
And they genuinely believe it, and I think she got that across to us
Very
so
clever.
well.
Yeah. Now, of course, she has you've got, not surprisingly, she ensnares. You see lots of these situations. It sort of builds, and then she sort of puts a pause to the kind of, if you saw it as her killing. It's interesting that I didn't follow through on that question on what the red marks were. I didn't. I saw it and I thought I don't know why, but again, I suppose the nice thing about this film is
I don't think that.
I was thinking, but literally, she'd have had detectives chasing her. But it's not a literal film in many regards, and yet it is. At the same time.
I don't think it is. And like she said, there's other girls out here, and they carry scissors.
Yeah.
Now, is that not her? So she was just confusing the guy. Does she not carry scissors sometimes and cut their penis off?
Absolutely.
I must ask the girls if they thought that.
Yeah, a really clever detail then in this film is Bo Burnham. And what did you think of Bo Burnham?
I'm obsessed. I will watch everything he's in.
He is
an absolute natural.
Yeah.
He's sort of odd and geeky and goofy looking, isn't he? You do fall a bit in love with him because he has everything that you want, that charm, but that confidence, but that vulnerability. For me, he was the absolute, of course Carey Mulligan is utterly brilliant, but he was a star.
Well, I think we'll talk about Carey's performance because it was so layered a performance. But I mean, I do think Bo Burnham played it absolutely brilliantly, and you know, what a talent. He for me, there was a bit of Matthew Modine in there. He was almost a bit Jimmy Stewart. There was a real, you know, he's just sort of, he was floppy, he was funny, he was lovely.
But what fantastic direction to
Brilliant
get those
direction.
relationships.
I
mean, I know we feel a bit like, oh God, you know, like Emerald Fennell, really posh. Where she got the money to do this film? Is it just got loads of friends? But you cannot deny the absolute talent. And I'm sorry, Mark, but I just want to spool back a bit. You're saying this film was made in 21 days.
They shot at 21 days.
From a director's perspective, what does that actually mean?
It's remarkable.
It's remarkable.
It's a remarkable turnaround, especially for this, and that's where, especially for the extent to which Carey Mulligan got into this part.
Well, that's the other thing. You've got no star behaviour if you're shooting a movie in 21 days. You've got people committed. You've got people. So that's the other thing. She's obviously a brilliant people person, that she's brought a group of people together.
I mean, if you actually unpack what you're looking at on screen, it's not actually a very complicated movie at all. She's done some very clever production design. She's got a very clear style and feel to it. She's gone for an incredibly religiously strict shooting style, which is this symmetrical, very composed, very stylized, quite measured. Everyone's movement is incredibly slow. All that kind of stuff. So it gives a sense of it being slightly, it's a bit hallucinogenic, it's a bit dreamlike, it's a bit like
but not too. Don't let that take you off. Not in an extreme way.
But at times I was getting, and I mentioned this whilst we were watching, I was getting real Clockwork Orange vibes, because Clockwork Orange is really interesting about violence and about random violence and about the way in which we deal with violence. And this is a film in which the main character, the woman, is violent.
But we never see a moment of it.
We never see it, but it's all about male violence.
Yes.
And you never actually see male violence either.
But we are left judging her violence.
I know.
And we don't even see it.
No, exactly.
That's why it's so
Now, the film's
clever.
come in for a lot of stick, because there's this one moment where there's one scene where some reviewers have not known how to deal with it, where she essentially, she picks up a girl at the school.
Brilliant.
Who's the daughter of the principal, and the principal has who sanctioned sort of like abuse, rape.
Well, hadn't dealt with the rape of her friend. Yeah.
But Carey Mulligan's character essentially kidnaps her daughter, like a predatory paedophile.
But again, in a very nice way. The girl isn't actually traumatised.
No, and isn't in danger.
At all.
But there's a scene where she then presents this fait accompli to the principal of the college, where she suggests that she's dropped her daughter in a room with men just like the man that raped her friend. Think
about us all watching it last night, and we had from ages 75 down to 14. And everyone was saying, oh, that's a bit much though, isn't it? I mean, she's gone to the next level. Let's just remember what happened to her friend.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's like, oh no, there's a line. Now this woman is a bit too angry.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I don't actually think that there's a point at which you have to stop your anger with what had happened to her and to her friend. I loved the way she is so brilliant, the way she made us question our own train of thought and make us see the way that we've been manipulated. It reminded me actually of when Maddie was talking about, that's our eldest daughter, was talking about we do a podcast, and we were talking recently on our podcast about abuse and men's behaviour to young girls. And our daughter was telling us about a couple of incidents that she's had, one at a bus stop and one somewhere else. And without even thinking about it, she felt she needed to explain what she was wearing. And I just can't get over that, because we haven't brought her up that way. But it's like, she's so conditioned to think like that. And I was wearing a top, and I was wearing jeans, and I wasn't wearing this, and I wasn't wearing that. None of this matters. If you are in the presence of a man that doesn't see sees no boundaries as to what he wants to do, well, then you are a victim. You're vulnerable and can be a victim of his.
I thought what was really clever about it was all the men, even the men in the honey trap scenarios, had something very nice about them. I thought what was really clever about it as a film was that I, as a man, and I could feel it also in the room with you women, we were all wanting to find the nice man in the film.
There was only one that was one wholeheartedly vile, which was the friend.
Yeah, and there was only one that was wholeheartedly nice within the context of the film, the dad.
Oh, God.
The wonderful relationship between Carey Mulligan and her father.
Oh my God, the relationship
tragically
with
sad.
the
Yeah, there was a sort of that distance where he. Oh my God, I felt so many conflicting emotions there, where I wanted a connection between the two of them.
I was a parent. I was a daughter. I was a wife. I went through every single part of me as a woman. That's what this film did. Yeah. Touched every part of me as a woman. It is. I think it's a work of genius.
It is a work of genius. It's like a shiny bauble, quite literally a shiny bauble, but the most crucifyingly disappointing development in the film for me, and this is a huge spoiler, is the turnaround on the Bo Burnham character. Now, I felt that there wasn't an inevitability about it. It doesn't matter that there was an inevitability about it in a sense for me. I just desperately didn't want it to happen.
Of course we didn't.
And when
it was so important. So important is because with all the campaigns that are going back around at the moment, Reclaim the Streets, all of this, we need the bystanders to say something.
Yeah.
And he was a bystander.
Absolutely.
He was culpable because he stood there and he wanted to be in with the guys. He'd probably been, as a younger boy at school, he probably hadn't been in with the in crowd.
Yeah.
You know, and this was a way, well, just turn your eye away, just...
And that, for me...
there was one bit that I didn't like when he turned on her, because I didn't think that... I think if we hadn't had that one line, it would have been perfect.
And incredibly, again, full tribute to Bo Burnham for playing it like that. Now, you know, so his character turns, and we have this moment where essentially, you know, he was the one, like you said, what is it? Bad things are done by men who say nothing, you know?
No, bad things are done when good men and women stand by and say nothing.
And it reminded me, we talked about this after the film, it reminded me of the incredibly important discussions that were had around the Jodie Foster film in the 80s called The Accused, which I'd forgotten, although we all remember it was notable because it had an explicit rape scene in it. And how that was covered was it made the news. But it was a story, the film, pivots around the guy who watched, the people who watched it happen and did nothing.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, I don't remember that detail, but it was crucial. My mum reminded me of that.
I was traumatised for years after
Yeah. And I think this is and what's interesting about this film is you don't actually, so it takes you right to the edge of what you don't want to see without really seeing it.
Kind of seen it and she doesn't show it. That's what's so clever about it. There's
it.
No sex, there's no violence, there's no blood.
No.
And yet you feel like you've been through all of that. You've
Absolutely.
experienced, like I went up to bed and I didn't know what to do with myself.
Let's just scroll back for a moment. So Carey Mulligan.
Oh my God.
There was two moments for me. I don't know what you thought of these. There was one moment when she was in with the principal and she was talking about her friend, and she was essentially kind of, telling her she'd hijacked her daughter, and her daughter was as vulnerable as her best friend had been.
She gave everyone a chance.
Changed.
She gave everyone a chance.
She gave everyone a chance. Everyone a chance, because you can either see her as brutal, sociopathic. She's called a sociopath, isn't she, by a couple of characters in the film? Which she's not.
She's angry.
She's heartbroken.
She's heartbroken.
She's absolutely
Nobody plays sadness like Carey does, and I worry for her as an actress because she's not playing it. She's completely in it, and I think maybe partly why that took 21 days. That film she probably couldn't do more than 21 days. I think she was that. She had 100% inhabited her character.
Yeah.
She was that for however many days after. There was no masks. She was just telling the truth the whole way through, and that's why she broke all of our hearts.
But in a weird way, that might have been why it worked so well. I think they just ran at it and they just were in it.
I think they probably did it in sequentially as well, because often films are shot out of sequence. But I feel like it was almost shot like a play then.
Yeah,
it went through the whole story.
But you're right. If I think of her in Wildfire and I think of her in The Dig, even, she's deep, and she won the Spirit Awards last night for Best Actress in this. It's another award ceremony in America, and she dedicated it to the memory of Helen McCrory, an actress that she says she just takes so much from. I mean, it was such a raw, and
she's paying a price for what she gives us.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, and we
like
have
Helen,
to appreciate that.
She gets completely absorbed by the character, and you know, to play a character like that. I mean, just to watch it as a woman, just to watch it, it's grueling because you are questioning. You know, mostly for me, when I was questioning her, I wanted to slap myself around the face and say, "What the hell are you doing?" But then she was empowering me. I felt empowered also by her character, and also reminded of the situations that I've been in, the situations I missed, the situations our daughters could find themselves in, or just miss by the luck of God. You know, and I think we all went to bed last night feeling a little unstable with ourselves. I felt a gibbering wreck
as a father of daughters.
He actually got up afterwards. He said to the girls, "I really apologise."
I apologise for being...
For Dad, they were irritated by you. He went, "All men."
Yeah, I felt genuinely apologetic for all men. I mean, the film builds to the most moving, sacrificial, self-sacrificial moment. And I'd be interested to know how you read that final scene. I clearly read it as her offering herself up for that to happen. I mean, I think that was the intention, because
I think she had no. When she says earlier on, "I fooled myself for a minute that it would be okay," I think she was always going to die. I think she couldn't bear the silence.
And that moment where...
Because you don't actually know what happens to her friend, but you assume that she's killed herself. And I think that she knew she was never going to get over it.
Yeah. And that little, she has a soliloquy or a sort of monologue with the guy that she's strapped to the bed at the end, and when she talks about her friend, I mean, that was the moment that cut us all. We were all cut. Absolutely. It's a deeply emotional film. I mean, you know, there's a danger that something like this, and this is where it's very unlike something like Clockwork Orange, which for me is one of the problems with a film like that, dealing with these sort of subjects of violence, you know, and in that it's not genderfied. Well, it is in certain scenes, but there's no emotional content. This is an incredibly emotional film. It's incredibly powerful and challenging, and I would argue that it's precisely how discomforting it is. If it makes you feel uncomfortable, that's probably because it's absolutely doing what it should do to you.
Absolutely, you're supposed to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I doff my hat to the brilliance of the director-writer.
Yeah.
That she left it really all to our own minds. And you know, if only more directors and more writers could take a leaf out of that book. We don't have to see gratuitous violence and rape. We don't have to see it.
Interestingly, this director has pulled off, in that scene with the principal, the horror of what you realise she might have done. As the director very cleverly takes you don't know for a minute there whether she's actually done this. But what she achieves there is a total flip on the misogyny of a great director like Alfred Hitchcock. The only other director I can think of who could have pulled that scene off, ironically, is Alfred Hitchcock.
Why?
Because he was the master of not showing anything. He would infer the horror.
Do you think she's a big fan of Alfred Hitchcock?
Could be. And what's great is he's renowned for being a huge misogynist and a woman hater. And what's brilliant about this, she's taken his skills as a director, flipped it on its head. And when I came out of it, I said to the girls, that's top drawer filmmaking. That scene is top drawer filmmaking. If you had to home in on one scene in this film, that was so masterful. So masterful.
She's I'm afraid to say we didn't want to
because
we felt a bit jealous. But she's got really rich friends and got filmmakers. But fuck it, she is seriously talented. And we did go in with prejudice.
What would you give
We went
it
in
as a
with
score?
prejudice about her name and her background and her contacts, and I think it's really important that we challenged us.
Yeah, it's true. It's very true. So what would you give it? If I know you hate scoring things, but if you had to score it, what would you give it?
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10. I'd give it 98 out of 100 because I prefer the 100 thing. And I'll tell you why I wouldn't give it 2. There was one moment where she really missed the beat, but I forgive it. That was the scene
when
with,
your wife gets. Oh, okay.
No, with the mother, with the mother of her friend. It was such a bit
that was a weak scene. Okay, yeah. So I'm gonna have to go to 9.5.
No. I mean, I think that's one moment, but for me, it takes me to 98.
Quite a lot for you to take off for that one moment. She made it in 21 days, Mark, as well.
Yeah.
She's a genius.
What about 99? 99. What? Just one.
I think that last one is a little bit jealous.
Yeah, that is. I just wished I was Emerald Fennell.
Please subscribe to the channel, guys, and have a look around because there's a whole lot of other stuff we do on here. For more film and family fun, don't forget to click the subscribe button and make sure to click the bell to never miss an update.